Welcome back to The Nation. Time now for our media panel. Listener columnist Bill Ralston and ad man David Walden. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Now, there was one big interview that has had everyone talking this week, and it was the showdown between the two Johns.
Is the wholesale accessing of metadata, emails, phone records, all sorts, completely against the knowledge of the American people under similar legislation that you were drafting.
Well, for a start off, you're making a very bold statement, which is not correct.
I'm stating fact.
No, you're not.
Am I wrong?
Yes, you're wrong.
What was wrong in that statement?
Because
the NSA was doing that?
No, because you're saying that we are proposing to do things which would be illegal.
I'm saying it took place in the United States.
Okay, I can't talk about the US's legislation, but under New Zealand legislation, to go back to the point, the only time they can look at people's metadata and their information in the context that you're talking about is when they have a warrant. There's 9 cases. Okay, so let's give you this example.
Wow, there we had 17-minute interview this week. Bill Ralston.
It wasn't an interview. It wasn't an interview. John Campbell did not ask questions. He was making statements. At that point, it becomes a debate. And at that point, a debate with John Key is not a good idea because this is a guy who wiped the floor, frankly, with Phil Goff at the last election, took Helen Clark on and won. He is a debater. We haven't seen him in primetime television doing this kind of thing since the last election. It was the most impressive performance I've seen him do. And despite what the left may claim, he was not media trained for that. He sat down, picked off the subjects he wanted to talk about, and just went for Campbell. He did what we told him to do on this program a few weeks ago. Get out, sell your policy. Defend it.
I think also, Rachel, what he did, though, was I think he is a master of speaking in language that people can understand. We've had so many politicians who've either talked down to the audience or used extraordinarily long and convoluted explanations. Key came as if he'd just been next door for a barbie. He was relaxed. He wandered into the studio. He didn't have any kind of angst going on. John seemed as if he was very worked up. Key was quite, I think, controlled, and when John started to get very cross with him, Key was very measured and just said, well, you're wrong, and let me tell you why you're wrong. And I think a lot of the audience would have looked at that and gone, I've suddenly learned this is an issue also. I mean, I'm in the case. I'm on the side of the people who say, you know, this is probably required, and let's not get too exercised about it. You know, I think the snapper throwaway earlier in the week was probably on the money for most of New Zealand.
Bill, it raises interesting issues, doesn't it, about advocacy journalism and also the issue about whether, you know, you're as a journalist, you're holding a government to account, or whether, when you become an advocate, whether you start to have an element of contempt for a government too.
Well, part of the problem is when you're doing advocacy journalism is when you cross into the political arena, as opposed to taking up a cause, the poor, the mentally ill, anti-drugs crusade. But once you start taking a left-wing political position in a country where 49% actually support the government, you've got a major problem with your viewership, and it's going to actually impact on audience the more you do it, and the more that program is seen to be of the left, the less its audience will become. You know, what Key did in that interview, and I thought he did it really well, was pitch not to try and convince the Labour left that the GCS bill is any good, not even really to support to buoy up his own support. He was going for the middle ground voter who would swap.
So how did Holmes avoid finding himself ever in this situation, or did he?
Well, I think Paul was a master at asking the questions that the audience would sit there going, why don't you ask him this? And all of a sudden, magically, Holmes would have that question. He asked it in a pretty laid back and often, I think, insightful manner. And he used to tease the answers. He once said to me, you can actually ask a politician anything if you ask it the right way. And I think he was a master at that. And that's why he got some pretty interesting interviews and did some amazing stuff.
Paul would advocate for causes, but he would not advocate in a political way. And I mean, I would have no idea. I knew him for 20 years, how he would have voted. I have no idea whether he was Labour, National, Green or whatever.
But I think, I mean, I love some of what John Campbell's done, and I think some of his interviews and things are terrific. But on that particular occasion, what happened is a long-form interview with the Prime Minister. I think I was a little uncomfortable about the fact that he seemed to be getting quite not angry, but at least sort of losing the respect that I think someone should show to the Prime Minister. You could sense his frustration, and he just allowed it to bubble over a little bit, I think.
It ran for 17 minutes, and congratulations to TV3 for running 17 minutes in prime time on an issue like that. Frankly, they should have run the full 30 minutes and just thrown the whole program out. It would have given Key more time to actually explain his position. It might have given John Campbell more time to actually really get into some of the probing questions that he obviously wanted to do but never did.
But it was refreshing to see a politician answering stuff in a very simple, straightforward. And when John would say, make a statement, he'd say, you're wrong, and let me tell you why you're wrong. And I think a lot of people looking at that came away going, I don't really still understand this GCSB bill, but I kind of feel relieved
and
that it's not going to be...
he's the guy of the fence, mowing the lawns, flipping the sausages on the barbie.
I'm with him.
Yeah,
you know?
OK. All right, let's move on to our next topic, the continuing decline of the newspaper business. The days of going into the dairy for your, daily news fix seem to be coming to an end. New figures from Nielsen show the continuing decline in newspaper circulations. So these figures compare essentially July 2011 to June 2012 with July 2012 to June 2013, so the space of a year here. And they show a big drop in all the major dailies except the Otago Daily Times, which is intriguing. David, tell me, why does the ODT still seem to be a popular form of how you get your news?
Well, I think it's probably a pretty good paper, but I also believe that the rest of the country ignores Dunedin, and I think the people of Dunedin need to know what's going on, and the only way they're going to find out is from their own local paper. I think if you read, it's very rare you see anything about Dunedin in any of the national dailies. I think they've got a good sense of what's important to their local audience, and they're delivering it, and their circulation is staying up. The other publications around the country are under some real pressure, and we've seen newspaper circulations just continue to slide, and it's a real worry for them. And they're desperately trying to get us all to go online, and the trick is to get us how to pay for that, because we're prepared to part with our buck at the dairy, but are we going to part with our buck in bed in the morning when we go online?
But the ODT is doing has the right recipe in that it's talking about its own community. You know, it does a lot of parish pump stuff. It covers planning issues and all those sorts of things that you want to know about. And you're right, no one else is covering what's going on in Dunedin, so they've got to market to themselves. It's a tougher ask for the Dominion Post and for the Herald and even the Christchurch Press, because there's so many other news sources covering what's going on in their patch.
Yeah.
And people are prepared to pay, say, for NBR, they're prepared to pay for that as a specialist. It's interesting because you wonder whether with a paywall, whether the Herald has to sort of almost divide itself up. So if you're a sports nut, you might pay for the sports section. Or
well, I think they just need to paywall it. I mean, they're giving away their content online. You were saying you sit there and look at your iPad and read it on the iPad.
I read it on the iPad. And the interesting thing, and we were talking about this, is you read stuff on the iPad or on your phone, and the stories are all kind of just stacked. You get the actual printed edition and you turn, and there on page 10 is one of the stories, but because there's a big story above it, its emphasis is significantly smaller, and the whole feel of that story is completely different when you read the printed version. I think it's going to be hard to get people to part for with money for the online version, because we're used to getting it for nothing.
Well, the listener is a good model there. They've set up a paywall, but you can also subscribe. They've got a combination subscription system here where you can get the printed edition, plus you can access it online and things like that too, if you want to get across it. That's APN, the listener. I think that could be the model they're trialling for the Herald.
Yeah, it could be. The interesting thing is NBR have a paywall, but they hold content out of their online stuff on a Friday to try and encourage you to buy the printed version, which kind of says cheating, I think, don't you?
As an NBR subscriber, I am so annoyed with them, because I'm online subscriber and I have to get I have to also subscribe to the print edition because they hold it back.
And then they sneak it in on over the weekend, you see, just to fool you.
All right, gentlemen, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much, Bill Ralston and David Walden. Appreciate your input this morning. Now.